Hello, this is Clarence Moye with Awards Daily here with Alyssa Jirrels from Fatal Attraction, which is streaming on Paramount Plus. Alyssa, great to meet you.
Hi, great to meet you.
So I have to ask before we get started, what
Mhm.
was your relationship with the original Fatal Attraction? Like, did you watch that when you were trying to understand the character? Because you play Ellen, and
Yeah,
Ellen is obviously a 5-year-old child in the
she
original. So
is.
there's
She is
you
indeed.
have the lucky benefit of not having someone come before you with an iconic performance. So what
Yeah.
what was your relationship to that?
Yeah, no, I feel very lucky that I didn't have that hanging over my head
Mhm.
because, the kid does a great job. Like
She
if you
does.
watch, she does an excellent job as that character, but no, she's very much like just kind of an appendage to the whole situation. So I didn't watch it before I started.
Mhm.
Actually, I watched like a little bit of it, and then sort of when it started getting into the Ellen stuff, like my only reason of not watching it was just like my actor brain reason was that I know that like her childhood was such a big part of the character. It's going to be a big part of, of the older character. And so I didn't necessarily want to have like a picture of what that would look like going into it. But I've watched it since and it's excellent. And yeah, that kid is great. She's like, it's kind of insane how little they care about her at all. Like it's just very like she's she's going through it. Sorry, there's a dog outside. She's going through it. But yeah, I don't know. I wanted to see what our version of that childhood would be. Yeah.
She's definitely in the film. She's definitely used as a pawn by everybody.
Definitely. And nobody's like, this poor child, it's like this kid's getting knocked around, but
Mhm. And
whatever.
then her bunny, and then her
And her
bunny.
poor bunny. I know. Yeah,
Uh,
that's how I introduce myself. Whenever anybody asks me who knows the original movie, whenever they ask me like who I'm playing, I say I'm playing the older version of the kid who gets their bunny boiled, and they know it immediately.
right, but no bunny boiling for this Ellen.
No, not for our Ellen. Thank God.
Yeah,
Thank
absolutely.
God.
So, given as I'd mentioned before, given the original character of Ellen is a child, you don't have anything on which to base your interpretation. So you've got the screenplay. In that screenplay, what allowed you to get, again, putting on your actor brain, what allowed you to get close to the character? What allowed you to figure out who this adult Ellen was, at least in the initial episodes of the series?
Mhm.
And
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, it was sort of like bits and pieces throughout the filming. I think initially, what I found really interesting about her, which I hadn't seen before, and I don't know if this was just, I think it was sort of a combo of definitely Alex's intention, Alex Cunningham, the writer's intention, and also my personal interpretation of it. But she was very like in the initial script, she's going through a really like hugely emotional thing. And she's just kind of going through the motions of her life. And a lot of what she's doing in sort of like actor tactical terms is she's just relaying information from one person to the next, which I found to be fairly detached. And I just thought that was really interesting that the character was written that way because I think that it reveals that there's like a lot more going on underneath if somebody is kind of she's in the experience but then she's also going to therapy and she's continuing to transcribe these lectures and she's pretty smart in therapy and then oh no she said her dad was dead, okay, that's a lot of like compartmentalization. Like there was just interesting things about her that revealed to me a huge gap between the person that she was presenting to the world and what was maybe actually going on inside of her. And I thought that was really interesting. And I thought that the idea of somebody who's very quiet and perceptive, but is actually like 10 steps ahead of everybody, I thought that was interesting. So, yeah, I mean, there was just like, there's sort of the story and all of the trauma that she goes through and stuff, but her way of dealing with it and sort of that, I don't know, that was like the specificity that I wanted to bring to it was just that intellectualization piece, because she's a psych major too. And I feel like I can intellectualize things and I don't often see other like young people characters that can. So that was cool to me.
As you mentioned, when we first see, or when we first get to know, when we first see Ellen, she's in the parole hearing. But
Mhm.
later of that episode, we do get a lot of encounters between her and her therapist.
Yeah.
But it's like we're dropped in at that moment in her life. So did you
Yeah.
start to look at kind of why did she go to therapy? What was that backstory? Did you kind of fill in the blanks there?
That was my first question, is why is she in therapy? Because it was like, all right, if she's so disconnected from her trauma, why is she in therapy? Like, what is this? What is she doing? And so I think my initial thought was she's a psych student, so she has to be in therapy. Like, it's part of her master's program. But Alex had a great, like, that was, it's funny that you say it, because it was literally, we had a text chain, and that was my first question to Alex and Silver, is like, what is her awareness about her own psychology? And what Alex said, which is what I thought was interesting, is that, God, sorry, there's so much noise outside of my window right now.
That's okay. It doesn't
Um,
come through that much, so you're
okay,
good.
good. What she said was that she probably started seeing like a child psychologist when she was a kid, and she probably had enough happen to her that she was like, okay, I should be in therapy, And it's like, but you can be in therapy and completely bypass everything that's going on with you. So I think it's a lot of who Ellen she's very intellectually evolved. I think she knows what she needs to be doing, but she's not gonna really get deep in there. There's too much. So
Right.
yeah, so that was a lot of, that was Alex's response, was like, she I think she knows that there's something wrong, but she doesn't want to make the choice to go into it
Right.
until the
And
show.
she's obviously playing with the therapist, right? Because she's
Mm-hmm.
excluding information, she's lying, about certain things.
Mm-hmm.
She's there for a purpose, that, but she is putting up a front. She is perfectly controlling
Hmm.
that whole communication and that whole narrative.
Yeah. Wow, that's so cool that you got that from that. Yeah, she is. God, I didn't even really think about it like that. Yeah, no, because I mean, that's it, is she doesn't want to go into anything that's going to be vulnerable.
No.
Like, she doesn't want to have a vulnerable experience at all. So I think that's a lot of how she operates, is you can control everything when it's all cognitive, and when you're
Right.
really smart, you can control everything. So
And
yeah.
she's a psych major, which is
And she's
super
a psych
dangerous.
major.
No, I'm
Right,
kidding.
exactly. But it's so very dangerous. But it's so funny, because I think you can really, like, you can so easily, like, you can seem really evolved, but like, I just feel like you can bypass so much with intellect. Like, a lot of people who study psychology, or like people who study like spirituality, are like the least practicing of what they study, but it's like, it's almost like an indirect way of fixing your problems that like doesn't actually do it.
Mhm.
Like, that's what she has.
So I want to talk a little bit about your interactions with Amanda Pete and with Josh Jackson,
Mhm.
who play your biological parents, but you don't have a lot of family scenes together. So how did you modulate your performances? How did you work with them to figure out how Ellen would react to him versus her mother? Like, talk to me about
Yeah,
that working relationship.
totally. Yeah. It was really interesting. I learned a lot. Like, it was definitely like a growing process. Like, you have your sort of initial thought about it, and your initial kind of like, oh, this is what it's going to be, and then you get on site and you're like, okay, they're doing different shit than I thought in my head, which is what makes it exciting. But Josh, I had such a like picture of who he was. I didn't really, like, I am lucky I didn't watch Dawson's Creek.
Mm,
Like, I'm not, like, I didn't really have like Josh Jackson in my head. He was very much Dan to me from the beginning. So I had a lot built in with him that like started from the audition. Like, there was so much surrounding that relationship. And I think it was interesting on set to kind of, like, he's such a, like, a charismatic person,
Mm.
and the person that he is very different than like the person that he was playing, especially in 2023. So his process was very like he could snap in and out really easily. And I was like, oh my God, like I have a harder time doing that. So it was like interesting to navigate that sort of thing. But I felt very like our character journeys like mirrored our personal journeys as getting to know each other. Like it was just very much, I don't think we really like truly bonded until the very last scene where we were supposed to bond. Like I think I sort of unconsciously kept a bit of a distance. Not in like a methody way, but just sort of that's I think what was happening.
Right. Well, it makes sense because he is a stranger to her in
Yeah,
the
it
show.
exactly. And it was like, yeah, and it total stranger to her. And I think that there wasn't a moment that it felt like I think at the end of the show they kind of have a moment where it's like, okay, I see you as a person and I see you as a person. And that like yeah, it's sort of symbiotically, even though Josh and I like love and respect each other and like totally like we get along great. Like I felt like we really bonded at the end, which was really cool. And then I Amanda I didn't spend a lot of time with. Like it was so funny. I didn't because like I get along so well with her, but I spent the least amount of time with her. But she's just, I mean, she's a very easy person to talk to and a very like she's an incredible actor and very honest and like really made me feel really comfortable and like put a lot of effort into making me feel really comfortable. So it's funny, like I think with both of them, like whatever the relationships that I had in my own self regarding Ellen, like that they kind of formed just naturally. You know, I think Amanda and I like I have such a kinship with her and I love her so much. And then also, but also like Ellen's weirdly like distant from everybody. So like
Right.
we also like didn't truly bond, I feel like, until sort of the end and stuff. But it was, yeah, they're both, I just think they're both like some of the, they're just really talented. And yeah, I learned a lot from both of them.
Awesome. Well, as are you, very talented.
Thank you.
So this next question, and by the time this posts, the series will have finished. But this
Okay,
next
sweet.
question for anybody who's watching, this is a spoiler, so watch the show, come back, and finish it. Um, there's obviously a huge twist at the end where
Twist.
she is now becoming an Alex Forrest of her own in the last episode.
Mhm.
Obviously, you'd read the screenplay, right? So
Mhm.
I'm assuming that that change was apparent to you from when you started working on the project. Is that an incorrect
So
assumption?
so I didn't know about it until about a month before filming.
Okay.
And then I didn't get the actual script until maybe were shooting like episode 4 or
Okay.
something. So I had a sense of what was happening, but I didn't know like every second of it. Like I didn't know every single script, but yeah, I had a sense of it. And yeah, it was again, it was just like discovering how that sort of manifests throughout and also like how to not spoil it per se, you know, but also make sure that the logic was like checked out, like making sure that like all of the decisions, because I think like she's sort of becoming her own Alex Forrest, but also she has such a different diagnosis than Alex, you know? So it was like that was sort of the process for me, I feel like was just figuring out like, okay, so how can we tell this story about a person who, you know, about because the beautiful thing about it is that it's like she is the product of this trauma and you know, we're doing a show about childhood trauma and how something is comes to be and now you get to see it through this kid, but you also don't want to do like have it not be connected to her own diagnosis and just be like, oh, she's just Alex. She's like Alex 2.0. So that was sort of the challenge and the fun part of it was figuring out like how is she different than Alex and what about her would be her own form of crazy, you know? Yeah.
And you mentioned this sort of already, but it's in the back of your mind when you're starting to film the show. I have to
Mhm.
assume that and as you rightly said, you need to to modulate your performance in a way so that it doesn't become an unexpected and unrealistic massive shift at the end.
Yeah,
How do you
exactly.
accomplish that?
Um, like, well, I don't know. Uh, I think a lot of it was in my own, like, again, sort of the logic of that character versus the Alex character, like, I think you get to see that Alex has a way darker backstory than
Right.
Ellen, you
Right.
know, like she experienced a lot more abuse. She experienced a lot more, and she's, I think, inherently a lot more volatile and a lot more chaotic. And like, that's how her thing manifests. And for me, it was just like, I felt like, okay, the only way I can make sense of this, because Ellen doesn't have the like horrendous verbal abuse and like that relationship with her dad that Alex has. Even though she has a different relationship with her dad. So
Right.
I talked to, there was a like a forensic psychologist that I talked to, who me and Lizzie talked to. And he talked about, because technically Ellen is borderline as well, but there are different kinds of borderline
Mhm.
personality disorder. And there's like a certain kind that's like, it has really similar symptoms, but something happens in childhood where there's not the same freedom to have that volatility. And so you have different tactics, and everything sort of compounds upon itself on
Mhm.
the inside, So for me, it was just important that we stayed true to like what her form of trauma would be. And that to me manifested as a an obsession with an older man. That's all daddy issues. Like, it's all like it's all like it doesn't have to be like, oh, she's stalking this guy. I think it's coming from a very young place to
Mhm.
me, of just like trying to figure out her own stuff with her dad. And she probably just had these like, she got these like glom ons to people, and then something clicked in the wires and you just keep going after that, but it wasn't, I never like, I, yeah, I certainly was trying to not be like, okay, now I'm crazy. Like, it was always like, there has to be like, the love for this person is similar to the love for Dan, and it's coming from that weird sort of place. I don't know if any of that made sense.
No, it does, and you're kind of lending into this theory that I have about this character, that there isn't one single trigger point, right? It's just a collection of a lot of things that are happening,
Yeah.
and it's just, it stems from the absence of a biological father and missing that, but having that kind of replaced by someone who is a father but has their own trauma and obviously was a murderer. And there's just a lot of stuff in
There's a
that pot.
lot of stuff going on. There's a lot of stuff going on. Yeah. And it's like, she doesn't have the freedom to be like, yo, I need to feel all this, like, she doesn't have that. So it has to go somewhere, and then it's directed into this obsession,
Right.
with the person. It's directed into that. Um, and it's also like, she's figuring out her own other stuff in the process. But yeah, so that's sort of how I internalized it for myself.
Nice.
Yeah.
So, last question for you. So, obviously, this is a drama series, and assuming there is going to be a season two, where would you like to take the character of Ellen? Just you yourself. I don't know if you've read anything or if you had any conversations, but just you, Alyssa, telling me, where would you like to take Ellen?
If I had, well, yeah, if I had free reign, which thank God I don't, but I mean, I think it would be interesting to see the volatility that could come out after she has had a little bit more freedom and security in her relationship with her dad. I think that that's such a big thing. And to me, she gets a happy ending with Dan to a degree. And so I think it would be interesting to just see, like, oh, okay, so she's sort of been in the shadows figuring out her stuff, and in her own way, now something has been healed a little bit, and now something else can be unleashed. I feel like it would need to be an unleashing of sorts. I actually had a conversation with Josh about this, where yeah, that would be what I feel like it would need to be, is just everything that was repressed and everything that was intellectualized can sort of come forward, and she gets to evolve into a more, she's maturing as a person too, so she could maybe evolve into a more real but also dangerous version of herself, because there's a lot in there that's like not chill, and it would be cool to see that manifesting in a way that's like no holds barred. That would be cool.
Just as long as she's not cooking up any bunnies.
Listen, we'll make sure of that, as long as she's not doing that. No buttons.
All right, Alyssa. Well, thank you so much for the time. Great performance, and best of luck to you. And I can't wait to see this story continue.
Thank you for the great questions.
Take care.
All right, take care. Bye, guys.